So today's lesson is chapter 9.
Sorry.
And we're going to look at pieces of 3 chapters. I'll let you consider this. Hosea means salvation.
I'm just saying, I had my glasses on. You don't know when they got them direct. Because
Can I have your
those
attention?
glasses right dead center of the eye.
Everybody hear me now? So, I'm one of those curious guys. And as you look at Hosea, there are actually 14 chapters. I didn't remember that. But I did know that Daniel has 12. So if we're going to say that Daniel is a major prophet and Hosea is a minor prophet, what goes with that? Well, somebody who has a little more time than I do, and I guess it would be translation specific, actually did a word count. Daniel has over 9,000 words, and Hosea has 3,615 on somebody's count. So the number of chapters doesn't make a whole lot of sense. There's a lot more words to be said about Daniel. Let's look at the setting of the time. We'll go to Hosea chapter 1, verse 1. The day of the Lord comes to Hosea, the son of Beeri, and the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, and in the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel. Now, I've said it before, and I'll continue to repeat it whenever I throw out information. I don't make a big deal about dates. I don't know how accurate they are, but sometimes they can just be a decent reference, if you will, even if they're off, some or maybe even a lot. What we're going to talk about today occurs 250 years after the time of King David. 650 years after Israel came into the Promised Land. So, given that information, you can decide for yourself, do you say, wow, it sure didn't take Israel long to sin? Or if you look at it from the other perspective, you may say, wow, look how patient God has been. Now, actually, this book will speak of condemnation to both Israel and Judah, because at this point in time, the kingdom is divided. But in our lesson, we're not going to talk about Judah. We'll just kind of skim past it. To get a real understanding of what it would have been like, you need to go to 2 Kings chapter 14. And I'm not going to take time to read verse by verse, but in verses 24 to 28, we find that King Jeroboam II, and that's the Jeroboam that's going to be king of Israel at the time, did evil in the sight of the Lord. Yet the Lord saw that Israel was bitter with no helper. So by the hand of Jeroboam II, God was going to spare Israel. He restored the territory of Israel, recaptured land that had been taken. And a big thorn and a terrible tough opponent, Syria, was conquered by Assyria, so they no longer punish Israel, no longer make any threats. Now, from time to time, I'll mention commentaries, and I go to the Enduring Word quite a bit. It's one that's pretty easy to read and generally has good references. While I say that, let me tell you that the guys or people who wrote that wouldn't know the plan of salvation of a truck went along. So you have to take whatever you learn from any of these commentators with a little bit of sense. But in this case, I think it's probably an easy quote. You see, they said that for a period of time, archaeology has shown that the homes in Israel were all pretty much set size. But during the time of Jeroboam II, they found houses that were much larger. So the point that they're trying to make, and with Israel being really in pretty good shape right now, that God has seen that Jeroboam has brought it all back together, I think they probably best be described as fat and sassy. They're in pretty good shape, physically, financially, but certainly not spiritually. Anybody have any questions or comment about that? Well, let's look at Hosea's family. We'll go to verse 2. When the Lord began to speak by Hosea, the Lord said to Hosea, Go, take yourself a wife of harlotry and children of harlotry, for the land has committed great harlotry by departing from the Lord. What God intends to do in this book is have the life and the family of Hosea mirror what is going on in Israel. Hosea said, pick a wife of harlotry. Just like at that time, Israel was worshiping all kinds of phony gods and idols and no longer being faithful to God. Not unusual. There's apparently some debate, this comment, go take yourself a wife of harlotry. Because most believe that when Hosea took Gomer as his wife, she was not an adulterous woman. And Wayne Jackson, a well-known Christian, fine commentator himself, who has passed on, says what's used here is prophetic prolepsis. And that's speaking of something that will happen as if it has already happened. On that same page is a fellow by the name of Leon Stancliffe. And what makes him particularly special is if you go on the GBN website, they have included his commentaries. So I'm going to say that somebody, not smarter than Rick, thinks that Leon Stancliffe is a pretty good commentator. And what he says is that Gomer was not a harlot when she was married, but she came from a land that was saturated with immorality, and harlotry was accepted. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense that she wasn't adulterous when they were married. Because if this is going to parallel Israel, if she was a prostitute when he married her, that wouldn't fit at all. Because go back to Exodus 24:3. So Moses came and told the people all the words of the Lord and all the judgments. And all the people answered and said, one voice had said, all the words which the Lord had said, we will do. So we know it didn't take long for Israel to fall away. But they started out, once they got the law, they started out faithful. So I kind of side with the other guys that Gomer was not a prostitute when Hosea married her. But it won't make a big difference. The story's still going to be the same. Continue on with verses 3 to 5. So he went and took Gomer, the wife of Diblaim, and claimed her and bore him a son. Then the Lord said, call him Jezreel. That means God will scatter. For in a little while I will avenge the bloodshed of Jezreel and the house of Jehu, and bring an end to the kingdom of the house of Israel. It shall come to pass in that day that I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel. So instantly we got a new character brought in, Jehu. Who in the world is Jehu? Many Jehus in the Bible, but this man in particular was the one who killed evil King Ahab, and he took the throne. And at this point, Jeroboam II was Jehu's great-grandson. So quite a few in his reign had followed on his son's grandson, great-grandson. But that's going to end. Break the bow. That probably wouldn't make a lot of sense to us today, but it made sense to them because the bow was one of their weapons, right? So the idea of breaking the bow meant you're going to break the military strength. Without military strength, without God, and that's where these people are right now, they have no hope. Verse 6. And she conceived again and bore a daughter. Then God said, call her name Lo-Ruhamah, which means no mercy. For I will no longer have mercy on the house of Israel, but I will utterly take them away. pretty tough words, don't you think? Utterly, it's one of those kind of words that it just sounds tough, nothing else. Let's go back to 2 Kings 17 in verse 6. In the 9th year of Hosea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried Israel away to Assyria and placed them in Elah by the harbor, the river of Gozan, in the cities of the Medes. Verse 20 of the same chapter. And the Lord rejected all the descendants of Israel, afflicted them, and delivered them into the band of plunderers until he cast them from his sight. And verse 24. Then the king of Assyria brought people from Babylon, Cutha, Ava, Hamath, and from Sepharvaim, and placed them in the cities of Samaria instead of the children of Israel. And they took possession of Samaria and dwelt in the cities. When Hosea said, God, I will utterly take them away, I think it's safe that he meant it. Interesting thing that I almost let slip. If we look at Jezreel, Hosea's first son by the woman, it said that they had a son. But in verse 6, and she conceived again and bore a daughter. It doesn't say that it was Hosea's child. We have no information to confirm that it was or that it wasn't. But if she wasn't Hosea's child, I think that kind of muddies the water, that thickens the plot a lot. Verse 7. Yet I will have mercy on the house of Judah, will save them by the Lord their God, and will not save them by the bow, or by sword, or by battle, by horses, or kingsmen. So I said we weren't going to talk about Judah, and yet here we slip in a verse. What do you think it means? He will not save them by bow, by sword, by battle, by horses, or horsemen.
It just mentions the military strength of God's care for his people down through time. Although he used the military many, many times, it's like Gideon got down to 300 soldiers. So, God doesn't save through physical strength or material things.
It reminds me a lot of Gideon when I read this. Let's go back to this setting. Hezekiah was considered a good king. Most things he did were good. But Hezekiah was a man, and at one point in his life, Hezekiah thought it was wise to bribe the king of Assyria. Oh, why go to God and bother him, right? Let's just pay off the bribe. Well, what happens when somebody bribes you? Are they ever satisfied? Does it ever quit? And it didn't. The more Hezekiah would do to bribe the king of Assyria, the worse it got. Until Hezekiah had one of those moments and his brain came back to him. And he said, I need to depend upon the Lord. And he prayed for God's help. The army was needed with God. And I think we have the answer in 2 Kings 19:35. And it came to pass on a certain night that the angel of the Lord went out and killed in the camp of the Assyrians 185,000. And when the people arose early in the morning, there were all the carcasses, all dead. God took care of it. Eight, 9. And when he weaned Lumaha and conceived and bore son, she said, then God said, call his name Lo Ammi, which means not my people. You are not my people, and I will not be your God. Anything worse God could tell Israel? I will not be your God. Thoughts and comments on what we've covered so far. Would you want to be in Israel? Pretty miserable setting. All the stuff you may have and all the land you've accumulated, God's not going to be with you.
It makes me wonder how Hosea, how he felt about this. No suggestion that he was not a willing participant. So I kind of wonder how much of this was for him, his own understanding, so that he might then present this to the people, sort of an object lesson, I guess. But that had to have been hard, I would think, for Hosea to be the example or be the object lesson or whatever it is. When you think of people that really sacrificed to obey God, this would have been something.
Makes him stand up for sure. Do you think any of the prophets liked the message that they were delivering? Would anybody be happy to tell their people, you're done. God's fed up and that's it. You're done. Is that a message you want to deliver? You know, the prophets did. And while we may not be as boisterous, we may not be as abrupt, don't we sort of have that same message too? That your only hope is in God. And if you don't have God, if Christ is not part of your life, your future's not bright. I sure hope we say it with words that aren't quite so blunt. And it takes quite a bit of time to build a relationship to where you can tell somebody that. But ultimately, doesn't it need to be said? Would you rather your friends and family die without the hope of heaven because you didn't want to tell them that they were wrong? Comments?
It makes me think too, you're right about the Jeremiah and others that, were greatly persecuted because of the message. But the prophets many times were told they're not going to listen before they delivered. And yet he said, go ahead and do it. I think that's a challenge for us today to understand that our responsibility is to warn people. Even, we miss time say, look, they won't listen. Nobody will say, I'm not going to do it. Well, what they do with it is not my responsibility, that's theirs. But I do think that that's a lesson for us. We need to invite people, we need to encourage people, we need to talk about the church, we need to talk about Christ. Even though we know that most people not going to pay any attention, but there are those out there.
And there's a time to shake the dust off and move on.
It's also the idea that when judgment day comes, we got no excuse. You can't say they didn't get the message. They did. They got the message, and they didn't do anything about it.
Don't know what tomorrow will bring, if there will be a tomorrow. But can you think of a time when the Bible was more accessible? You can have it read to you online if you want. That's how when I don't choke them with some of these tougher words. That's how I heard them the first time. I went online and listened to somebody that I hope knows more than me that knew how to pronounce them. Now, there are homes, and certainly around the world, there are probably lots of places that don't have internet. But if you do, the Bible's everywhere. And commentaries that I wouldn't have the money to go out and buy or wouldn't even know where to look. But they're there. And if you want to think about it, sitting here in Tennessee, do you know how many weeks there are lessons that you could go out and listen to a live speaker if you wanted to? Somebody that's faithful? I'll put in a plug. There's one starting tonight, and we might know the guy who's going to speak, Steve Brown. But if you want to know the truth, there's so many different ways to get it. You almost have to push back and say, I don't want to hear it, because it's there. And in so many ways it's made it easy. And yes, you can always find an exception. But for most of it, it's there, it's easy.
I was reading it last night this morning, and it was making that point that in America, the bestseller is still the Bible. And most homes have a Bible. They may not need to believe in God. But most homes in America, the most common book in every home is the Bible. I don't know what that says, but it is available. It's there.
And yet, the fastest growing religion in this country is Islam. A group that does not treat women with any respect at all is the fastest growing religion in this country. Maybe you'll find a case that I don't remember, and that'd be okay, because I don't claim to know it all by any means. But whenever God makes a proclamation, whenever he says, punishment is coming, does he ever lead you to that home? I think back to the New Testament, to Paul in particular. In some of those books, Paul blisters the people. 1 Corinthians, depending on how you read it, that could not have been taken well. They were messed up, and Paul laid it on them and told them they were messed up. But before the book was over, was he still not professing hope? Was he still not telling them that God could be with them? That God was there for them? Why do I make that point? Also was not in our text. With the 10th verse of Hosea chapter 1. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured or numbered. And it shall come to pass in the place where it was said to them, you are not my people. There it shall be said to them, you are sons of the living God. That wasn't going to be seen by the people that originally heard this message. Even as terrible as those folks were, God was telling them as a nation, as a people, there would be hope. Comments to that? Second chapter, verses 1 to 3. Say to your brethren, my people, and to your sisters, mercy is shown. Bring charge against your mother, bring charges. For she is not my wife, nor am I her husband. Let her put away her harlotries from her sight, and her adulteries from between her breasts, lest I strip her naked and expose her, as in the day she was born, make her like a wilderness, and set her like a dry land, and slay her with thirst. Again, God is comparing Israel to an adulterous wife. And he's making a plea to Israel. Give up that lifestyle. Follow me. Because God is not willing to share. You cannot be Baals and gods at the same time. It will not work. You cannot be Satanists and gods at the same time. It will not work. It is not acceptable. How unacceptable? Let's go to the Ten Commandments. Exodus 20, 3-5. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image, any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, and that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them nor serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. Told this when they came out of Egypt. And you think that's not true today? This is the Ten Commandments. It's part of the Old Testament. But has God's nature changed? If it says that he's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, has his nature changed? Is any less jealous of his people? For his people? Does this application of the adulterous wife mean anything to us? Well, in some places the church is called a family. Isn't it also called the bride of Christ? You think that was a slip up or an accident that God came up with that? We know better than that. So has his nature changed? No. He wants us, and he wants all of us, not just a part. And what he really wants is for us to stop running from him. Because that's what we do. We run away from God because this is a little hard to think about, and that would require me to change, and that would be so hard. Is the choice any better? Verses 4 and 5. I will not have mercy on her children, for they are children of harlotry, for their mother has played the harlot. She who conceived them has behaved shamefully, for she said, I will go after my lovers, who gave my bread and my water, wool, my linen, my oil, and my drink. Oh, really? Is that so? Who brought Israel out of Egypt? Bring some straight up. Who led them in the wilderness for 40 years? Fed them, gave them water. Either their clothes didn't wear out or he gave them water. I'm not sure I have a perfect answer for that. Who did that? Who gave them the promised land? Oh, remember Achan and the Babylonish garment that he hid when they were told not to take anything? And in Ai, 31 men were killed. Sounds like such a small number for war. But it sent a message, didn't it? Do things as God says, And things will go the way God said they will go. Israel wasn't strong enough to take the enemies that was in the land of Canaan. They're giants. Don't you remember what the 10 spies said? They're giants. How could you take them? God did that, not some stranger. And for us, Matthew 7, 7 through 11. Ask and it shall be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and it will be open to you. For anyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be open. For what man is there among you? If his son asks for bread, give him a stone. Or if he asks for fish, will he give him a serpent? If you then, being evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good things to those who ask him? So it's there for us. And it may not be all the lavish things that we might want, the biggest house, the fanciest, fastest car, or whatever it is you want. But our needs, ask and it shall be given. Chapter 3 is going to take us back to Gomer. Verse 1. Then the Lord said to me, go again, love a woman who is loved by a lover and is committing adultery, just like the love of the Lord of the children of Israel, who look to other gods and love raisin cakes of the pagans. Hosea could have put away Gomer at any time. There were provisions for that. He didn't have to put up with this nonsense. What did he do? He took her back as his wife. Don't even know if those last 2 kids were his. But he took her back. And you say, wow. And yet we look at what God did for Israel, and they ran away. He was willing to take Israel back.
I think there's a lesson in this for today's time. When we look at the religious shape of America, how many have left Christ for the worldly pleasures, for the enticement, for whatever reason of denominational churches? But God is still willing for everyone to come back, and He paid the redemptive price with Jesus Christ to have you back.
I like the last part of that, and if it wasn't so serious, I'd laugh. It says, the raisin cakes of the pagans. That's kind of an interesting thing, isn't it? Chasing after the raisin cakes of the pagans. I don't know how I'm supposed to take that, but let me tell you how I take it. What is a raisin cake? I guess it's food. It goes in your belly and you might smile on the way down because the raisins are sweet and all that is good. But after it hits the belly, it's gone and that's it. And really, isn't that what the pleasure of sin is? For a time, whatever this thing you do, whatever this thing that you allow, whatever sin you choose, for a while, it may seem sweet. But what sin has not come back to you? Was it really that good? Cakes are gone. How special are they? And the sin? How good was that? Verse 2. I bought her for myself for 15 shekels of silver and one-half omers of barley. That's what the price of Gomer was. Maybe she was a sex slave, who knows? But Hosea had to buy her back. And again, I have to trust the commentators because I didn't live there and I don't study enough to know. But they said this 15 shekels of silver and one and one half omers of barley is the same as 30 pieces of silver. You ever heard of that before? I think yes. It was the price of the slave. So for all the ways that Gomer had hurt Hosea, he's got to buy her back. What picture does that show in your mind? And isn't it true that it's not just Israel, but every one of us that has sinned, no, we have to be brought back? Titus 2:14. Who gave himself for us. I need to tell you who that's talking about. That he might redeem us from every lawless deed and purify for himself his own special people, zealous for good works. 1 Peter 1:18 and 19. Knowing you were not redeemed with corruptible things like silver or gold from your aimless conduct received by tradition from your fathers, the precious blood of Christ,